Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We will start in a few minutes. We'll wait a little bit until everyone is connected. So how are you doing, Maria and Emma? Welcome again to our webinar in Fashion in Law.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Alba. Very excited to share everything.
Yeah. Again, today we are coming with a very trending and hot topic on how to communicate better. So I hope we give some clarity and clear guidance on that Green Claim Directive. So I think that maybe we should start because we have so much information to cover today. So let me share my screen. Okay. So welcome again to our webinar in Fashion and Law. Today, as we were saying, we are coming with a very trending topic in the terms of how to communicate in complying with Green Claim Directives. So before moving on to the main thematics, let me explain you the agenda of today's webinars. Firstly, we are going to start explaining why claims are important to be verified with data and key concepts. Then we will understand the role of European Union and consumers, moving on to timeline requirements and guidelines, and we are concluding with remarks and Q&A. So we first start, as always, let me introduce our experts of panelists today. First of all, we have Maria Lassa. Maria, she's a sustainability consultant and she's expert in social and environmental innovation. And she will bring us some light in the key concepts around this Green Claims Directive. So welcome again, Maria. It's a pleasure to have you today here.
Thank you, Alba. Pleasure.
And then Emma Terol, which you all know that she's our head of content and she's the best person to explain us and to guide us through the do's and don'ts of communication and the art of communication and sustainability. So welcome, Emma. It's also a pleasure.
Thank you. Happy to be here today.
So before moving on to the key concepts, let's answer you the first question. So why having green claims backed with verified data is a must today? First of all, and probably the key concept here and the most important, it's because over half of environmental claims are unfunded, which really show us the need of transparency and trust, which brings me to the second reason, because over 50% of European consumers don't trust environmental statements of products, which again highlights the necessity of transparency and accuracy. Third one, because it's a fact that greenwashing is a real risk for fashion brands. Third one, because there is a common confusion between third-party verified labels and self-certification, which also brings me to the fourth one, because European Union is creating a standard to ensure that every fashion brand is following clear guidelines, which this really give us a pivotal change towards transparency. And the last one, and probably the most important that you need to be care of, is that sustainability declaration will shift sooner or later from optional claims to mandatory requirements. So Maria, let's dive into the real importance of Green Claim Directives and put us into key concepts, and the differences between claims and labelings.
Thank you, Alba. And indeed, the EU is getting stricter in terms of its standards and regulations for the textile industry. But before we dive into the directive of green claims, let's look at some key concepts. It's important that we understand the difference between a green claim and a green label, or an environmental claim and environmental label. So I'm going to read from the screen. A green claim is any message or representation which is not mandatory under union law or national law, including text, pictorial, graphic, or symbolic representation in any form, including labels, brand names, company names, or product names, in the context of a commercial communication which states or implies that 1, a product or trader has a positive or no impact on the environment, or is less damaging to the environment than other products or traders, or it has improved their impact over time. So this definition is set on the proposal on empowering consumers for the green transition. And then we have the green labels, which are environmental labels, or they're also called eco labels. And they are basically labels that cover only or predominantly environmental aspects of a product, a process, or a trader. And it's important to know that, just in a nutshell, the difference is that a green claim is very broad. It's more like a statement that a company does, whereas a label is a mark that indicates that the environmental impact of the product or of a trader is lower. And they both are voluntary, and they both only cover environmental aspects, not social. Okay, now let's look at some timelines before, again, getting into the requirements on green claims. It's important to understand that this proposal for a directive on green claims is part of the wider EU Green Deal, which, amongst many other commitments, sets a commitment to ensure that consumers are empowered to make better informed choices. And the first piece of legislation that was set to protect consumers as part of the EU Green Deal was the proposal for empowering consumers for the green transition. And this was adopted in March 2022, so almost 2 years ago. And it basically amends the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, which is a long-time directive that is the main one in the EU that protects consumers. And it adds some key aspects to the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. First, it requires to provide information on the durability and repairability of products. Second, it aims to promote commercial guarantees that exceed the 2-year compulsory guarantee. And third, it protects consumers against even more unfair commercial practices than the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. And it actually adds 10 new items to the banned or blacklist of banned practices. And then in March of this year, of 2023, we have the Green Claims Directive, the proposal for a Green Claims Directive, which was adopted and which we will see now. And it's important to understand, too, that both of these, the proposal for empowering consumers for the green transition and the proposal for a Green Claims Directive, go hand in hand and are going to work together. Okay, so this is just to summarize a little bit what we just said. In March last year, we had the adoption of the proposal for empowering consumers in the green transition. March of this year, the proposal for a directive on green claims was adopted. And in the coming 18 months, both of these proposals' requirements will be adopted and transposed in national laws in each country of the EU. Okay, let's now dive deep into the requirements. And before we do so, again, a key difference that it's important to understand in this webinar is the difference between substantiation of green claims and communication of green claims. Substantiation is what we're going to see in this slide, and it relates to the ex ante characteristics or aspects that need to be verified before making a claim. Okay, it's the data that needs to be behind any claim, whereas communication is, as the word says, the communication of the claim itself. It's making transparent everything that has been worked behind. Okay, so now let's first see the requirements on substantiation of green claims. So first, the main change is that now firms will need to carry out assessments if they want to make a claim. And these assessments have to have some characteristics. First, they have to rely on recognized scientific evidence, accurate information, and relevant standards. 2, they need to demonstrate the significance of the claim from a life cycle perspective. 3, they need to determine whether the claim applies to the entire product or to specific parts or stages of the product. 4th, it needs the assessment behind needs to demonstrate that the claim goes beyond the legal requirements that are imposed by the EU on such product or category products. And 5th, there needs to be backup information on the environmental performance that is better than common practice and to common and legal standards. And the second, the last part relates to comparisons or to comparative claims, which are those claims that compare themselves to either another firm or to the same one and the same product, but from years before. And there is a requirement now that comparative claims need consistent information, coverage, and assumptions behind, so that the person knows what is the baseline year, what is the exact impact that has been made in comparison to that year or in comparison to that other product from another firm. So basically, as a summary, no data, no claim. We need to talk from a life cycle perspective. And finally, in terms of comparisons, these need to be fair.
Okay, so according to this, let's see some do's and don'ts in substantiating green claims. If we go to the first column, we can read no data, no claim. So the first claim says, this collection has been made with technologies that reduce CO2 emissions. As you can see in this claim, it doesn't include any figures, so you can't prove that any assessment has been made. So a right way to build this claim would be thanks to shifting to renewable energy sources, for example. This collection says 285 tons of CO2 equivalent compared to the industry standard. This claim includes figures proving that the assessment has been made. Remember that the fashion companies must ensure that they are conducting assessment through solid methodologies for substantiating these claims, and also providing easy access to the methodologies used to make those calculations. Also, I would like to add a disclaimer according to the second claim, which mentions the industry standard, because when you are comparing your products, as Maria mentioned before, you should always give access to the specification of the scenario against you have compared your products. Now, if we move on to the second column, talk from a life cycle perspective. The first claim says, we consume less water than our competitors due to organic materials. This claim is just specifying the materials phase, the raw material extraction, but it's not taking a wider look to the full supply chain. So a right way to build this claim should be from the extraction of raw materials to warehouse, we have used 30 less water than the industry standard. Here we're taking this wider look to the full supply chain, from raw materials to warehouse. And if we move to the third column, do fair comparisons, the first claim says, this cotton dress saves 30% CO2 emissions compared to the production of a polyester dress. This claim is wrong because you are comparing a cotton dress with a polyester dress, which are two different materials with two different properties. So a right way to build this claim would be this recycled polyester dress saves 20% CO2 emissions compared to the production of a virgin polyester dress with equivalent properties. Here you're comparing recycled polyester with virgin polyesters, with our two materials with the same properties, both are polyester. So you have always to provide consistent information for comparative claims, as Maria mentioned before. And now let's see some visual examples that we have prepared. For example, this is an example of how one of these claims could look like displayed on a physical product. As I mentioned before, it's very important to provide easy access to the methodology used to make the calculations. You could do that introducing, for example, a QR code on the product. This is an example from one of our clients, Saye. This is their impact website where you can see the different impacts of their last collection. And they are providing enough information to understand that they have calculated these impacts according to a life cycle assessment methodology. Because as you can see here, they're disclosing all the tiers of the supply chain that they have foreseen to make this assessment. And this example is something that will be available very soon in the e-commerce integration that becomes offered to its clients. That in the screen on the top, you can see the disclose of different environmental savings, and at the bottom you can see compared to the industry standard. And if the client clicks there, they will be able to see all the specifications of this industry standard scenario along the supply chain. This is one of the requirements that is compulsory by the legislation.
Thank you, Gemma. I really like the examples that you gave. I think they provide a very clear understanding and they give a good impression of how the adoption of the Green Claims Directive can work for the firms. So now let's dive into the requirements on communicating environmental claims. So as we saw, there is substantiation and communication, and now we're seeing the requirements for communication of environmental claims. Okay, so first, if the claim made is related to a final product, it needs to include guidance on reducing environmental impacts during the use phase. Second, if the claim is linked to future performance, so it's talking about some promises that it will make in the future, it needs to include time-bound commitments for improvements inside the product or the operations and value chain. Third, if the claim communicates a cumulative environmental impact, which means an impact that gathers many aspects of sub-impacts, the firm can only use aggregated indicators that are established by the EU. And fourth, the claims must include information on their substantiation, which is what we just saw previously, and notably product details, covered impacts, relevant international standards, underlying calculations backed up by scientific data, and details on the process for achieving the committed improvement and the claimed improvement. So in a nutshell, when communicating a claim, you need to first make your claim significant. Second, show true commitment, not only just say a sentence with your goal. And third, provide accuracy.
Okay, so now let's see some examples of do's and don'ts in communicating green claims. If we go to the first column, make your claim significant. The first claim that we can read is, our latest collection is designed with a strong commitment to sustainability. This claim is saying nothing at all because you are just mentioning your commitment to sustainability, but you are not giving any figures or any proof that you are truly committed. So the right way to build that claim, for example, to be more specific, could be, these sweaters' recycled materials reduce its global warming impact by 2.5 kilograms CO2 equivalent compared to the industry standard. Because environmental claims must cover relevant impacts and not just including buzzwords. If we move to the second column, show true commitment, and the first claim says, we are really committed to reduce our water footprint during the coming year. You can be very committed, but if you are not showing any figures or timelines to achieve that reduction, is no promise at all. So the right way to build this claim could be, our goal is to reduce our contribution to water scarcity from an average impact of 400K cubic meters of water equivalent in 2022 to 350K cubic meters in 2023. Here you are providing timelines and figures of reduction. Because claims regarding the future environmental performance, as Maria mentioned before, must include time-bound commitments for improvements. A third column, provide accuracy. The first claim says, this product lowers CO2 emissions by 20% compared to its equivalent on the market, and is not providing any methodology. As we mentioned before, you have to provide the methodologies that you have used to make your calculations. So the right way to build this claim could be, this product lowers CO2 emissions by 20% compared to the standard. This claim is backed by following relevant methodologies, including ISO 14040 for assessing its impact throughout its entire life cycle. Because, as we said, claims should always include detailed information such as the calculations made to substantiate your claims. And now we are going to see, for example, this is how one of these claims could look like on a label, always providing access to the methodology used for the calculations. This is a real example from one of our clients, EcoAF. This is their sustainability report from 2021. And here you can see their emissions reduction goals, and they are providing figures, percentage of reduction, and timelines on when they are willing to achieve those reductions as the directive points. And this is another example from one of our clients, Totum. This is their e-commerce integration, where you can see the product description of the impacts of one of their products along with their product description. And at the bottom, you can see our badge, which is powered by Become. This proves that these calculations have been made by a third party. And also, if the audience click in that badge, they go to our Radical Transparency site, where they are able to see the methodologies behind the calculations that we have done to get that data.
Thank you, Gemma. So we have seen requirements for claims. Now let's see the requirements for eco-labels, okay? Remember that this directive tackles both claims and labels. So first, environmental labels or eco-labels, they're the same, must meet the same substantiation and communication requirements that we just saw, okay? In addition to that, eco-labeling schemes must be transparent, accessible, and have details regarding their ownership, the objectives that they have, the monitoring that they have for the compliance mechanisms, and the procedures. Third, second, the conditions for joining the eco-labeling schemes must be transparent and proportionate to the firm's size and to their turnover, so that they can include SMEs. And finally, many restrictions will apply to new publicly owned schemes, which means that it will not be that easier to establish new public owned schemes. And also for the private schemes, there will be a stricter validation procedure in place.
Thank you, Maria and Gemma, for this clear and concise information. I really love the way you provide those do's and don'ts examples. And this brings me to my next question. Why it is so hard to comply this law without experts' help? I would say that there are 5 main reasons here. The first of all, that it is true that this directive is provided by a very technical and complex legal terms. Second one, is that regulatory agencies are not involving companies in these updates beyond public consultancy, which this is really a very risk issue that we need to solve immediately. Third one is that there is a very lack of clear methodology, and this can lead to misunderstandings. Fourth one, because always accurate environmental assessment demands a specific knowledge. And finally, because fashion companies lack a direct channels from regulatory bodies. So we really know that compliance, it's not easy, and the challenges that fashion companies will have in the next decade, it's a fact. So that's why we really think that we must work all together in the same direction to address these challenges. That's why at Become, we are committed beyond compliance. And that's why we really think that transparency is the key of the river of change. We are obsessed in providing accurate and verified data. And that's why we always follow these 5 principles. First of all, is that Become, we always strengthen their environmental claims with solid methodology. Second one is that, as the directive suggests, we always develop the impact assessment from a product lifecycle perspective. Third one, our methodology facilitates fair and accurate comparisons by using equivalent information. Then we always prioritize the use of primary data. And the last one, and probably the one that I am more proud of, is that we always provide clear information on impacts and methodology used. At Become, we have nothing to hide, and we really encourage our brands to communicate not only the bright side of sustainability, but also the shadows. Now, let's move to the final section of the Q&As. In that section, we gather the most important questions that we have been gathering during the last week. So, Gemma, let's start with the first one. What are the key requirements related to the Green Claims Directives?
Well, the first could be the conduction of a life cycle assessments based on solid methodologies. This is something that we've repeated a lot today. It's very important to provide accurate figures to prove your commitment, and you can't provide this data without any assessment. The second, also transparent and specific information on carbon offsetting. One of the news of this directive is that you must communicate your carbon emissions separately from your carbon offsetting. Also, you have to specify if these offsets are due to reductions or removals, as well as describe how the offsets are accounted. And third, I would say the substantiation of future environmental performance, including time-bound commitments. It's very important to show your commitment, but to go beyond a simple promise, you have to commit to achieve a target in a certain timing, as we saw in the example from EcoAlf.
Very interesting, the specification of carbon offsetting. Next one. How can sustainability be communicated in a real way without falling into greenwashing? So maybe this is like the key question of everyone.
Yeah. It is a very common question. First of all, show your data to prove your accountability and accuracy. Data is your best ally to fight greenwashing, always. Verify your message by a third party before using the claims in commercial communications, because if you don't do that, you can't know if your claims are right or not. And you should always rely on experts, as you mentioned before, Alba, to assure that you are communicating in the right way. And third, give access to the methodology used to substantiate your claims. We are repeating this a lot, but always be transparent with your consumers. Give freedom to read your methodology, and because if you are doing things right, you don't have anything to hide.
Yeah. Next one, how will the new claims directive impact small and medium-sized companies? Because at the end of the day, sustainability is not only for the big ones, also for the medium and small companies.
So small and medium-sized companies must comply with this directive. The only ones who are excluded will be micro companies with less than 10 employees, that they can meet the requirements voluntarily. And the member states need to take appropriate measures to apply the requirements, as Maria mentioned before, and we'll see how each country translates this directive into national law. And also we see which is the support, access to finance, training, and assistance that member states give to these small and medium-sized companies to ensure that they meet these requirements.
Thank you. Next one. How to communicate impact without the specific numbers from our own production, but calculation based on industry averages, which is a reality right now, right? Because we don't have all information in terms of traceability. So how can we provide this data?
The first thing is very important to communicate your impact accurately and evaluate your own products, and don't rely on industry averages, because relying on industry averages can lead to distorted impact figures and can it make more difficult to differentiate between the sustainable performance of different brands. And also we recommend, of course, to conduct a product lifecycle assessment to have a more precise and meaningful impact data.
Another hot topic, DPP. Will the digital passport display all the key requirements of the Green Claims Directives?
First of all, I would like to say that the digital passport and the Green Claims Directive are two different tools to guarantee transparency. So the digital passport focuses on displaying sustainability-related data throughout a product life cycle, but the Green Claims Directive regulates the accuracy of environmental claims in advertising and marketing materials. So while the Green Claims Directive provides guidelines for how those claims should be communicated in advertising and marketing materials, the digital product passport is related to displaying certain data along with their product.
And probably another very important and common question for everyone: when will these regulations come into effect?
Well, as Maria mentioned before, unfortunately, we can give a final answer. The Empowering Consumers and Green Claims Directive proposal are currently in the EU legislative procedure, and after adoption, member states are expected to transpose the directives into national law within 18 months, as Maria mentioned before. And the new rules will come into force 24 months after the directives are adopted and transposed into national law. So at the earliest, the requirements will be applicable from 2025 to 2026. So we encourage fashion companies not to wait this time and start preparing now to meet these requirements.
Super. Then what will be the consequences of non-compliance in communication? In that scenario, will be tax benefits for the good examples?
The consequences will depend on the member states as well, and they are defined yet. The measures taken by the member states should align with the gravity of the infringement, including dissuasive fine of at least 4% of the trader's total annual turnover, which could be a lot. For example, temporary exclusion for a maximum period of 12 months from public procurement processes and access to public funding. And related to the last question, tax benefits aren't associated with the Green Claims Directive, and this is a legal framework, and compliance with its requirements is mandatory. So this directive is not created to provide tax benefits for good environmental practices.
Okay. Thank you, Gemma. I have one more question for both of you. If you could give a piece of advice to the audience today of these Green Claim Directives, what would be?
Align with experts. Yeah. If you don't know how to carry out a life cycle assessment, go to a third party that is. I'm sorry, I've lost the screen, so I wasn't watching you. So I was saying, rely on experts. They have the knowledge and the base to help you address these requirements as good as possible. And don't try to do it yourself, because if there is already someone else that knows how to do that, go to that professional.
Yeah. What about you?
I would add, don't wait until the last minute, until it's transposed into national law, and take action quite quickly.
Yeah, that's important. I would also suggest to go step by step. I mean, sustainability, it's very overwhelming for everyone. So just put the basis and go like putting baby steps to make sure that everything it's well done. So far, this concludes our webinar today. If you have any questions, just write us an email and we will coming back to you. Thank you, Maria and Gemma, again, for your expertise and knowledge. It's always a pleasure to have you on those webinars. Thank you to all the audience for joining us today. I truly hope we provide a clear guidance on how to communicate with responsibility and also accuracy. So thanks again. Have a nice day and stay tuned for our next Fashion in Law webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.